The distress signal. In the vast emptiness of space, where silence reigned supreme, a faint signal broke through the void. The signal was weak, fragmented, and laced with static. Yet, it carried a desperate message. Help us. Please. They are coming. We cannot hold them back. The voice was alien but eerily similar to a human tone, tinged with fear and urgency. For centuries, no one had ever heard anything like it. On board the SS Resolute, a small but advanced exploratory vessel, Captain Aaron Hayes stared at the blinking monitor. His crew of Deathworlders, humans known for surviving the harshest conditions, gathered around him. Deathworlders had a reputation in the galaxy. Where others faltered, they thrived. Their resilience made them both admired and feared among alien civilizations. The distress signal had come from an uncharted region of space, far beyond the reach of most known maps. The coordinates pointed to a desolate star system, one that no ships dared to approach. Aaron's second-in-command, Lieutenant Kara Reed, furrowed her brows as she scanned the details. "This signal is ancient," she said, her voice skeptical. "The tech used is primitive, at least 100 years old, but it's on a loop. Someone sent it over and over, hoping someone, anyone, would hear." Aaron leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the monitor. "It's strange," he muttered. "It sounds human, but why would humans send a signal from the middle of nowhere?" The room fell silent. The rest of the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy. Most had stayed close to Earth or its colonies. The idea that a human, or something imitating a human, could be out there raised more questions than answers. "What if it's a trap?" asked Ethan, the ship's engineer. His voice trembled slightly, betraying his nerves. "We've seen this kind of thing before. Pirates, or worse, some alien species luring us in." Kara folded her arms. "Or it could be a genuine call for help. Isn't that what we do? We answer the unanswered, explore the unexplored." Aaron nodded. "That's true, but we need to be smart about this. If it's real, we can't ignore it. If it's a trap, we'll deal with it." As the captain, Aaron had seen his fair share of dangers. Deathworlders weren't easily frightened, but the unknown had a way of gnawing at even the toughest minds. His decision carried weight, and he knew his crew trusted him to make the right call. The ship's eye, a cold but efficient voice named Vega, interrupted. "Captain, the distress signal source is approximately 5 light-years away. Scans indicate a dying planet in orbit around a red dwarf star. Minimal atmosphere, unstable tectonic activity, and evidence of ancient ruins." "Ruins?" Kara raised an eyebrow. "That's new." Aaron stood, his decision made. "We're going." Vega, set course for the coordinates. Kara, prepare the team for planetary exploration. If this is a trap, we'll be ready. If it's a genuine distress call, we owe it to whoever's out there to help. The ship hummed as the engines roared to life. The crew scattered to their stations, adrenaline mixing with curiosity. It was moments like these that defined Deathworlders, not just their physical strength, but their unshakable determination to face the unknown. As the Resolute approached the coordinates, the signal grew stronger. The static began to clear, revealing fragments of a voice that sent chills through the crew. "They are here. The weapon must not escape." "What weapon?" Ethan whispered, his face pale. The message cut off abruptly, leaving the room in an uneasy silence. Vega's voice returned. "We are entering the target system. Scans confirm the presence of a planet matching the signal's origin. However, I am detecting anomalies." "What kind of anomalies?" Aaron asked, his voice steady. "Energy readings that do not align with any known technology. High levels of radiation and irregular magnetic fields. Caution is advised." The Resolute slowed as it neared the planet. The crew gathered at the viewing deck, staring at the world below. It was barren, with cracks running through its surface like scars. Dust storms swirled violently, obscuring their view of the ruins Vega had mentioned. "Looks like a ghost planet," Kara said softly. "What could have happened here?" Aaron remained silent, his eyes scanning the desolation. A sense of foreboding settled over him, but he pushed it aside. They had a mission. The ship landed on a relatively stable patch of ground near the ruins. The crew geared up, their suits designed to withstand hostile environments. As the airlock opened, a gust of dry, scorching wind greeted them. The ruins loomed ahead, ancient structures that seemed almost alive in their decay. Symbols were carved into the stone, symbols no one could recognize. Aaron's communicator buzzed. "Captain, we're picking up movement," Vega warned. "Unidentified life forms, closing in fast." Aaron turned to his crew, his voice firm. "Stay alert. We're not alone here." The first step onto the planet's surface felt heavy, as if the ground itself resisted their presence. In the distance, the ruins seemed to whisper, a low, mournful sound carried by the wind. And then the distress signal crackled to life again, louder than before. "Help us, please. They are here." Aaron clenched his jaw. Whatever awaited them, there was no turning back now. Arrival at the dying planet. The SS Resolute hovered above the surface of the barren planet, its engines humming like a heartbeat in the void. The crew stared out at the desolate landscape through the viewing deck's reinforced glass. Below them, a world of decay stretched endlessly, cracked terrain, swirling dust storms, and ruins that jutted out of the ground like the bones of a long-dead giant. The planet's red dwarf sun hung low in the sky, casting a dim, ominous glow over everything. The ruins seemed to shimmer, as if the light bent unnaturally around them. It wasn't just desolation. It was a haunting scene, as though the planet itself mourned its forgotten history. Captain Aaron Hayes stood at the helm, his jaw set. He wasn't one for superstition, but something about this place felt wrong. He turned to Lieutenant Kara Reed, who was reviewing their scans. "Anything new?" he asked. Kara shook her head, her eyes never leaving her tablet. "Atmosphere's toxic as expected. High levels of radiation, but nothing our suits can't handle. The ruins are the source of the anomalies. Energy readings spiking all over the place. It's like the planet's still alive. But barely." Aaron's gaze shifted to the rest of his team. Ethan, the ship's engineer, fidgeted nervously with his tools. Dr. Leela Carter, their xenobiologist, was unusually quiet, her eyes fixed on the ruins. And then there was Mason, their weapons specialist, who seemed more irritated than afraid. "This place gives me the creeps," Mason muttered. "I've been to war zones less unsettling than this." Aaron nodded. "Stay sharp. We don't know what we're walking into." "Vega," he called, addressing the ship's AI. "Keep scanning the area. Let us know the moment anything moves." "Understood, Captain," Vega replied, its voice cool and detached. "I will maintain surveillance." The ship's landing gear extended, and with a soft thud, the Resolute touched down. The airlock hissed open, releasing a puff of sterilized air as the crew stepped into the planet's hostile environment. The ground crunched beneath their boots, dry and brittle like ancient parchment. The wind was fierce, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a low hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't just wind. It was something else, something alive. "Do you hear that?" Leela asked, her voice muffled through the comms. Aaron paused, listening. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the air like a whispering voice just out of reach. "We hear it," he said. "Stay close." The team moved toward the ruins, their steps cautious. The structures were massive, carved from a material that seemed neither stone nor metal. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, lines and curves that glowed faintly, pulsating like veins carrying blood through a living organism. "Captain," Kara said, pointing to one of the walls, "this isn't just decoration. These symbols are a language, but it's nothing I've seen before." "Can you translate it?" Aaron asked. Not yet, Kara admitted, but it's repeating. Like a warning. Warning about what? Ethan asked nervously. No one answered. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, the air grew heavier. The hum transformed into a low, resonant vibration, making their helmets buzz. It felt like the planet itself was watching them, judging their every move. Then, the ground beneath them shook, a deep, guttural tremor that made the ruins groan. Dust and debris fell from above, and the team froze, weapons drawn. Vega, report, Aaron barked. Seismic activity detected, Vega replied. Localized, originating directly beneath your position. Proceed with caution. That's comforting, Mason muttered, gripping his rifle tighter. The team pressed on, their lights cutting through the dimness of the ruins. They entered what appeared to be a central chamber. At its center was a massive obelisk, black and smooth, standing in defiance of the decay around it. The same glowing symbols were etched into its surface, but they flickered erratically, as if the obelisk was struggling to stay alive. What is this? Leela whispered, stepping closer. Her gloved hand hovered over the obelisk, hesitant to touch it. Aaron held up a hand. Don't. We don't know what it does. Before anyone could respond, the hum rose sharply, becoming a piercing, high-pitched sound that forced the team to cover their ears. Lights flashed across the obelisk, and the symbols on its surface rearranged themselves. Suddenly, the distress signal crackled to life in their comms, louder and clearer than before. They are here. The weapon must not escape. What the hell does that mean? Mason shouted over the noise. The obelisk began to glow brighter, its surface rippling as though it were liquid. The ground shook violently, and a deep guttural roar echoed through the chamber. Aaron's voice cut through the chaos. Move. Back to the ship now. But before they could retreat, the entrance they had come through collapsed, blocking their exit. The obelisk's glow intensified, and from the darkness, shapes began to emerge, shadows that moved against the light, taking form. Leela's voice trembled as she backed away. Captain, we're not alone. The shapes solidified, revealing biomechanical creatures with sleek, angular bodies that seemed to shimmer like liquid metal. Their eyes, if they could be called that, glowed with the same light as the obelisk. The largest of the creatures let out a deafening screech, and the others followed, advancing toward the team. Aaron gritted his teeth, weapons ready. We're not going down without a fight. As the first creature lunged, the chamber erupted into chaos. The ruins, once silent and still, had awakened, and the Deathworlders were now the intruders in a place that had been waiting for centuries, waiting for them. The silent stalker. The ruins were alive. Not in the traditional sense. No bustling markets or towering cities, but in a way that made the hairs on the back of every Deathworlder's neck stand on end. Every step felt like trespassing on something ancient, something that had been left undisturbed for millennia, and didn't take kindly to visitors. Captain Aaron Hayes led the group through a maze of shattered pillars and narrow corridors, his weapon drawn, and his senses on high alert. The obelisk chamber was far behind them now, but its glowing symbols and the biomechanical creatures had left an imprint on their minds. The team had fought their way out, but something about the creatures didn't feel right. They weren't just attackers, they were guardians. But guardians of what? The group pressed deeper into the ruins, the air around them growing colder, heavier. The faint hum that had accompanied them earlier was gone, replaced by an unnerving silence. It was the kind of silence that felt wrong, like the world was holding its breath. We shouldn't be here, Ethan muttered, clutching his engineering tools like a lifeline. This place, it doesn't want us here. Keep it together, Mason barked, his rifle sweeping the shadows. Whatever's out there, we can handle it. Aaron glanced over his shoulder. Stay sharp. We don't know what else is in these ruins, but we're not alone. That much was obvious. The feeling of being watched had grown stronger with every step. It wasn't just paranoia. There was something out there. Something they couldn't see. Leela. The xenobiologist paused by a shattered wall, her eyes scanning the faintly glowing symbols etched into the surface. These symbols, she began, her voice barely a whisper. They're changing. What do you mean, changing? Aaron asked, his tone sharp. They're rearranging themselves, she replied, pointing at the wall. Like they're alive. Aaron moved closer, his weapon still raised. The symbols did seem to shift, their glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Can you make sense of it? Leela shook her head. Not yet, but it's like they're trying to communicate. Aaron frowned. Whatever they're saying, it can wait. We need to find a way out of these ruins before. A sudden noise cut him off, a faint, scraping sound, like metal dragging against stone. The team froze, their breaths caught in their throats. The sound was distant but growing louder, closer. What was that? Kara asked, her voice tight. Something's following us, Mason growled, gripping his rifle tighter. Aaron motioned for silence, his hand raised. The scraping stopped, replaced by the faint sound of something. Breathing. It was heavy, deliberate, and far too close. The team's lights swept across the ruins, illuminating crumbling walls and jagged shadows. Nothing moved, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming now, suffocating. Vega, Aaron said, his voice barely above a whisper. What's out there? The AI's response crackled through their comms. Unidentified lifeform detected. Movement patterns suggest stalking behavior. Estimated distance. 30 meters. 30 meters, Ethan hissed. That's practically on top of us. Stay calm, Aaron ordered. Mason watched the rear. Kara, with me. Leela, keep close. They began to move, their steps slow and deliberate. The ruins seemed to close in around them, the corridors narrowing as if the walls themselves were shifting. Every sound, the crunch of their boots, the soft hum of their suits, felt deafening. Then it came again, the scraping, closer this time, echoing through the ruins. And with it, a faint clicking noise, rhythmic and deliberate, like claws tapping against stone. It's hurting us, Leela whispered, her voice trembling. It's not attacking. It's driving us somewhere. Noted, Aaron said grimly. We're not going to let it. He raised his weapon, aiming into the darkness. Show yourself, he barked, his voice cutting through the silence. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged. It was tall and angular, its body sleek and reflective like polished obsidian. Its limbs were unnaturally long, ending in sharp, claw-like appendages that scraped against the ground as it moved. Its face, or what passed for a face, was smooth and featureless, save for a single glowing red line where eyes might have been. The creature tilted its head, its movements unnervingly fluid. The red line flickered, and the clicking sound grew louder, reverberating through the air. It's scanning us, Leela said, her voice barely audible. It's trying to figure out what we are. Aaron didn't hesitate. Mason, fire. Mason unleashed a burst of plasma rounds, the shots illuminating the creature in brief flashes of blue light. But the creature moved faster than they anticipated, dodging with inhuman speed. It let out a piercing mechanical shriek that sent chills down their spines. Move, Aaron shouted. Get to the next chamber. The team ran, the creature's screeches echoing behind them. The ruins seemed to shift as they moved, the walls narrowing, the corridors twisting. It was as if the entire structure was alive, working against them. As they entered a larger chamber, the creature appeared again, this time on the far side of the room. It stood motionless, its head tilted as if studying them. Then, without warning, it lunged. Aaron barely had time to react. He raised his weapon, firing a burst of plasma rounds. The shots connected, causing the creature to stumble, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out another shriek and vanished into the shadows. This thing isn't going to stop, Kara said, her breathing heavy. It's hunting us. Aaron scanned the chamber, his mind racing. No, it's protecting something. We need to figure out what. The team gathered, their weapons ready. The creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows. But now, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to uncover the secrets of the ruins. And whatever those secrets were, they were worth killing for. The betrayal. The air in the ruins felt heavier now, almost suffocating. The Deathworlders had survived the relentless stalking of the biomechanical creature, but their nerves were frayed. The ruins were a labyrinth, and every turn seemed to lead them deeper into its clutches. Yet their destination was clear. The heart of the ruins, where the source of the distress signal and the whispers of an ancient weapon awaited. Captain Aaron Hayes led the team cautiously, his weapon drawn. The glowing symbols on the walls had grown brighter, their pulsating rhythm almost hypnotic. They seemed to guide the team deeper into the structure, as if the ruins themselves had a will of their own. "Do you feel that?" Kara Reed, the lieutenant, whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum. "It's like the walls are watching us." "They probably are," Mason muttered, his rifle scanning the darkness. "This place is alive. I can feel it." Aaron didn't respond. His eyes were fixed ahead, where the corridor opened into a massive chamber. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, and at the center stood a pedestal, its surface smooth and polished, as if untouched by time. On it rested a crystalline orb, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. "Is that it?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. "The weapon. It doesn't look like a weapon," Leela, the xenobiologist, said, stepping closer. "It looks alive." Aaron held up a hand, stopping her. "Don't touch it." "Not yet." "Vega, what do you make of this?" His voice crackled through their comms. "The object emits a unique energy signature, unlike anything previously catalogued. Caution is advised." "Caution?" Mason scoffed. "No kidding. This whole place is screaming trap." But before Aaron could respond, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, their light pulsating in time with the orb. And then the hum, the ever-present hum that had followed them since they entered the ruins, changed. It grew louder, deeper, resonating in their chests. "It's reacting to us," Leela said, her eyes wide. Aaron's instincts screamed at him to leave, but something kept him rooted to the spot. The orb seemed to call to him, its light pulsing in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. And then, without warning, the chamber doors slammed shut. The ground beneath them trembled, and a voice, deep, mechanical, and laced with static, echoed through the chamber. "You are unworthy." Weapons were drawn in an instant, the team forming a defensive circle. The voice repeated, louder this time. "You are unworthy." "Vega, what's happening?" Aaron demanded. "Unknown entity detected," Vega replied. "It appears to be an AI integrated into the ruins systems. It is analyzing you." Before anyone could respond, the symbols on the walls began to shift again, rearranging themselves into a language none of them could read. But the meaning was clear: leave or face destruction. "We need to get out of here," Ethan said, panic creeping into his voice. "This thing is going to kill us." But then something unexpected happened. Kara, who had been unusually quiet, stepped forward, her weapon lowered. Her movements were deliberate, her expression unreadable. "Kara, what are you doing?" Aaron asked, his tone sharp. She turned to face him, and for the first time, there was something in her eyes that he didn't recognize. Determination, guilt, betrayal. "I know what this is," she said quietly. "And I know why we're here." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Mason's grip on his rifle tightened. "What the hell are you talking about?" Kara sighed, lowering her weapon completely. "I didn't tell you everything about the signal. I've seen it before, years ago." Aaron's eyes narrowed. "Explain." She hesitated, but the truth spilled out. The signal isn't random. It wasn't just a distress call. It was a beacon. I intercepted it years ago during a classified mission. I didn't know what it was then, but I knew it was important. And now I know why. This place, this weapon, it's not just some ancient relic. It's the key to controlling everything. Every system, every species. It can rewrite reality. The team stared at her, stunned. Aaron's voice was cold. You knew this, and you brought us here anyway. I didn't have a choice, Kara said, her voice cracking. Do you think I wanted this? If I didn't come, someone else would. I thought we could use it to protect humanity, to make sure no one else could use it against us. And you thought keeping us in the dark was the best way to do that. Mason snapped. You put us all at risk. Before Kara could respond, the AI's voice returned, louder and more menacing. Your deception has been noted. The test continues. The ground beneath them shifted violently, and the pedestal began to sink into the floor. From the walls, more of the biomechanical creatures emerged, their glowing eyes fixed on the team. We're out of time, Aaron shouted. Defensive positions now. The creatures advanced, their movements fluid and unnervingly fast. The team opened fire, their weapons lighting up the chamber. But the creatures were relentless, their sleek forms deflecting most of the blasts. Kara, get to the pedestal, Aaron ordered. If this is your mess, you're going to fix it. Kara hesitated, but only for a moment. She sprinted toward the pedestal, dodging the creatures as they lunged at her. The orb's light grew brighter, its pulsating rhythm chaotic. She reached out, her hand trembling, and placed it on the orb. For a moment, everything froze. The creatures stopped. The tremors ceased, and the room was bathed in an intense, blinding light. Kara's scream echoed through the chamber. And then, silence. When the light faded, the creatures were gone. The pedestal stood empty, the orb nowhere to be seen. Kara collapsed to her knees, her breathing ragged. What did you do? Aaron demanded, pulling her to her feet. I activated it, she said, her voice barely audible. The weapon. It's awake. And with that, the ruins began to shake once more. But this time, it wasn't the ruins themselves. It was something far greater, something outside, something that had just been unleashed. The weapon's true purpose. The ruins were no longer silent. The ground trembled with a rhythmic pulse, and the walls seemed to hum with life. The once dim glow of the ancient symbols now radiated a blinding light, bathing the chamber in an eerie, otherworldly brilliance. The Deathworlders stood in stunned silence, their weapons lowered, their faces pale. At the center of the room, where the pedestal had stood moments ago, there was now a swirling vortex of light and shadow. It shimmered and shifted, taking on shapes that seemed almost familiar before dissolving into chaos. Kara Reed, still kneeling where she had touched the orb, clutched her head, her breathing shallow. Kara, what did you do? Captain Aaron Hayes demanded, his voice harsh. His gaze flicked between her and the vortex, his instincts screaming danger. I didn't mean to, Kara stammered, her voice trembling. It spoke to me. It showed me things. What things? Mason growled, his rifle aimed at the vortex. What the hell are we dealing with here? Before she could answer, the vortex erupted, sending a wave of energy that knocked the team to the ground. Aaron gritted his teeth as his helmet display flickered wildly, the AI Vega struggling to process the sudden influx of data. Vega, report, he shouted. The AI's voice crackled, distorted. Energy levels are beyond measurable limits. The entity is sentient. Warning. It appears to be probing your neural pathways. My what? Ethan yelped, scrambling to his feet. Leela, the xenobiologist, clutched her head. It's in my mind, she whispered. It's speaking to me. Aaron grabbed her shoulder. Leela, focus. What's it saying? She looked up at him, her eyes wide and filled with something he couldn't quite place. Awe, terror, It says it's not a weapon, she murmured. It's a being. It was created to manipulate reality itself, to protect, to destroy, to rewrite the universe. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The room seemed to grow colder, the light from the vortex pulsing in time with Lila's words. This isn't a weapon, Aaron said, his voice grim. It's a god. No, Kara interjected, her voice steadier now. She pushed herself to her feet, her eyes locked on the vortex. It's not a god. It's a prisoner. And we just set it free. The team fell silent, the implications sinking in. The hum from the walls grew louder, almost deafening, and the vortex began to coalesce, forming a shape, a figure. It was humanoid, but impossibly tall, its body shimmering with the same light and shadow as the vortex. Its face was featureless, save for two glowing orbs where eyes might have been. You are resilient, the entity said, its voice echoing in their minds. It wasn't a sound but a presence, pressing into their thoughts with an overwhelming weight. Few have reached this place. Fewer still have dared to awaken me. Aaron stepped forward, his weapon still raised. What are you? He demanded. Why were you imprisoned here? The entity tilted its head, its glowing eyes fixed on him. I was created by those who feared what I could do. They called me a weapon, but I was never meant to destroy. I was meant to reshape, to bring order to chaos. Order? Lila echoed, her voice shaking. What kind of order? The entity's form shifted, its light dimming. Order as it was meant to be. A universe free of conflict, free of death. But they did not understand. They feared what they could not control. So they bound me here, and they erased themselves. The room fell silent again, the weight of the entity's words settling over them like a shroud. Aaron's mind raced. If this thing was telling the truth, then it wasn't just a weapon. It was something far more dangerous. And now that you're free, Aaron asked cautiously, what happens next? The entity's light pulsed, and for a moment, its form seemed almost human. That depends on you, it said. You who have awakened me must choose. Will you trust me to bring the order your kind has always sought? Or will you try to destroy me, as they did? That's not much of a choice, Mason muttered, his grip tightening on his rifle. It's lying, Kara said, her voice firm. I saw what it can do. It doesn't bring order. It consumes. It rewrites everything, makes it wrong. You don't know that, Lila argued. What if it's telling the truth? What if it can fix things, end the wars, the suffering? Or it ends us? Ethan shot back. We don't know what this thing is capable of. Aaron held up a hand, silencing them. His eyes were locked on the entity. What do you want from us? He asked. The entity's glowing eyes flickered. To decide. To trust. The choice is yours. The chamber trembled again, and a new symbol appeared on the wall behind the entity. A circle divided in two. One side glowed with light, the other with shadow. Aaron turned to his team. We need to think this through. If this thing can do what it says, it's more powerful than anything we've ever seen. But if Kara's right, and it's lying. We don't have time to think, Mason interrupted, pointing to the walls. The symbols were rearranging rapidly now, their glow intensifying. This place is about to come down on us. Aaron's jaw tightened. The weight of the decision pressed on him like a physical force. Trust the entity and risk unleashing something unstoppable, or try to destroy it and risk losing the only chance to end the galaxy's chaos. The team looked to him, their faces a mix of fear and hope. The entity waited, its glowing eyes unblinking. Captain, Vega's voice crackled in his helmet. Time is running out. Choose. Aaron took a deep breath, his gaze shifting between the entity and the divided circle on the wall. Whatever choice he made, there would be no going back. The alien horde. The ruins erupted in chaos. The chamber trembled violently, cracks spidering across the walls and floor. Dust and debris rained down as the ancient structure groaned under the weight of its awakening. The entity stood motionless, its glowing, featureless face turned toward the Deathworlders. Yet its presence filled the room like a storm waiting to break. Aaron Hayes shouted into his comm, his voice barely cutting through the deafening roar. "Vega, status report. What's happening?" The AI's voice crackled, distorted by the surging energy. "Multiple hostile signatures detected in orbit. A fleet of unidentified ships has entered the system. Energy readings indicate advanced weaponry. They are descending rapidly toward your location." "A fleet," Mason growled, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Great. As if this thing wasn't enough." Aaron cursed under his breath. It's not a coincidence. They must have been tracking the signal, waiting for someone to trigger it. "They're here for the entity," Kara said, her voice grim. "And they're not here to talk." The room shook again, harder this time, as the energy around the entity intensified. It tilted its head, almost curiously, as though sensing the incoming threat. "They come to destroy what they do not understand," it said, its voice a calm echo in their minds. "As they always have." Aaron raised his weapon. "Then maybe they've got the right idea." The entity turned its glowing eyes toward him. "Do you believe you can destroy me? I am not your enemy. They are." Before anyone could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the ruins, sending the team sprawling. The chamber's ceiling cracked open, and a blinding beam of light shot down, carving through the structure like a blade. The sound of engines roared above, and the distinct hum of alien weaponry filled the air. "They're here," Ethan shouted, scrambling to his feet. The first of the ships descended into view, sleek and angular, their hulls glowing with an iridescent sheen. They weren't like anything the Deathworlders had seen before. A barrage of plasma fire rained down, striking the ruins and reducing ancient stone to molten slag. Aaron's comm crackled with Vega's voice. "Hostile ships have initiated bombardment. Recommend immediate evacuation." "Not happening," Aaron growled. "We're not leaving without answers." As if on cue, the entity raised a hand, its form flickering with intense light. The alien ships above began to waver, their energy fields rippling like disturbed water. One of the vessels tilted sharply, then plummeted toward the ground, exploding in a fiery burst. "What the hell?" Mason muttered, staring at the display of power. "I will protect you," the entity said, its voice calm despite the destruction. "But only if you trust me." Aaron hesitated, his mind racing. The alien fleet was clearly here to destroy the entity. But why? What did they know that he didn't? And could he really trust something so far beyond his understanding? Another explosion shattered his thoughts. This time, the aliens weren't targeting the ruins. They were deploying troops. Dozens of figures descended from the ships, their forms sleek and menacing, moving with unnatural precision. They were clad in exosuits that shimmered like liquid metal, their weapons glowing with a faint blue light. "They're coming in hot," Kara shouted, raising her rifle. The Deathworlders formed a defensive line, their weapons trained on the advancing aliens. The first wave hit hard, plasma bolts lighting up the chamber as the two sides clashed. The Deathworlders fought with the brutal efficiency that had earned their species its reputation, but the aliens were relentless, their movements eerily synchronized. "They're not just soldiers," Leela said, firing off a shot. "They're connected, like they're one mind." "Then let's disconnect them," Mason growled, unloading a barrage into their ranks. The entity stood at the center of the chaos, unmoving. Its light pulsed in time with the combat, growing brighter with each passing moment. Then, as if responding to an unspoken command, it raised both hands. A wave of energy rippled outward, freezing the aliens in place. "They are tools," the entity said, its voice cold. "Pawns of those who fear what I represent." Aaron took a step forward, his weapon still aimed. "And what do you represent?" "Power. Destruction." The entity's light dimmed, its form flickering. "Freedom. Balance. The choice to remake what has been broken." Before Aaron could respond, another ship descended, larger than the others. Its hull was adorned with strange symbols, glowing with a crimson light. From its underbelly, a massive weapon began to charge, its energy crackling with deadly intent. "They're going to level the whole ruins," Kara shouted. Aaron's mind raced. If the entity was destroyed, the alien threat might end, but at what cost? And if they sided with the entity, they risked unleashing something even more dangerous. The entity turned to Aaron, its glowing eyes piercing. "Decide, Deathworlder. Will you fight beside me, or will you let them destroy us both?" The weapon aboard the alien ship roared to life, its energy cascading toward the ruins. Aaron shouted into his comm, "Vega, get us a shield. Now." "Shield deployment impossible," Vega replied. "Energy levels exceed defensive capabilities." Aaron clenched his jaw, turning to his team. "We need a decision. Do we trust this thing, or do we take our chances with them?" The team exchanged uncertain looks, their faces a mix of fear and resolve. The entity stood silently, waiting. Above, the weapon charged for another strike. Aaron's voice was steady, but the weight of the moment was crushing. "We're out of time. What's it going to be?" The chamber trembled again, and the light from the entity pulsed one final time, as if mirroring the pounding of their hearts. The final decision. The ruins quaked under the pressure of the alien bombardment, each strike peeling away layers of stone and history. The air buzzed with the static of charged weapons and the unrelenting hum of the entity, its light now blinding and its form shifting unpredictably. Captain Aaron Hayes stood at the precipice of an impossible choice, the weight of a galaxy's future pressing down on his shoulders. The alien fleet above grew more aggressive, their synchronized attacks intensifying, as if they sensed time slipping away. Their crimson flagship loomed ominously, the colossal weapon beneath it charging for a final, catastrophic strike. On the ground, the Deathworlders held their position, their weapons aimed alternately at the advancing alien soldiers and the towering, glowing entity at the center of the ruins. The entity's voice resonated in their minds, calm and unwavering. "You must choose, Deathworlder. I offer you salvation, but to accept it, you must trust me." Aaron's jaw clenched as he looked at the others. Mason's face was set in a scowl, his rifle aimed squarely at the entity. Kara stared at the glowing figure, torn between guilt and resolve. Ethan looked like he wanted to run, his trembling hands gripping his tools. Lila's gaze was fixed on the entity, a mixture of awe and fear in her eyes. "We can't trust it," Mason snapped, breaking the tense silence. "You've seen what it can do. It's manipulating us, just like it's been manipulating everything in this damn place. And what's the alternative?" Lila shot back. "Let those aliens destroy it. You heard what they said. This thing can bring balance, end wars, save lives, or rewrite everything we know." Ethan said, his voice shaking. "What if it decides we're not part of its perfect universe?" Aaron raised a hand, silencing them. His gaze turned to the entity. "If we let you live, how do we know you won't turn on us? How do we know you won't become the very thing these aliens fear?" The entity's form flickered, its light dimming for the first time. "You do not. Trust is the cost of salvation." The ground shook violently as another barrage of plasma fire struck the ruins, carving a massive crater just meters away from the team. Vega's voice crackled through their comms, urgent and strained. "Captain, the structure's integrity is failing. Evacuation is strongly recommended." Aaron's mind raced. If they destroyed the entity, the aliens would likely leave, their mission complete. But if they fought to protect it, they'd be placing their trust in something they couldn't fully understand, something that might reshape reality itself. The entity turned to Aaron, its glowing eyes piercing. "You must decide now. There is no time left." Above, the alien flagship's weapon reached full charge. A deafening hum filled the air as the massive energy cannon locked onto the ruins. The crimson light cast long shadows across the cracked stone, painting the scene in a hellish glow. Kara stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "Captain, if we destroy this thing, we'll never know what could have been. What if it really can change things for the better?" Mason spat on the ground. "And what if it decides we're expendable? This thing isn't a savior. It's a damn wild card." Leela looked at Aaron, desperation in her eyes. "Aaron, we can't just let them kill it. If we do, we're no better than them." Aaron held up a hand, his gaze sweeping over his team. Each of them was right, in their own way. The entity represented hope, danger, and everything in between. The aliens represented fear, destruction, and the unknown. And he was the one who had to make the call. Taking a deep breath, Aaron turned to the entity. "If we fight to protect you," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him, "you have to promise us this. No harm comes to humanity. You help us survive. You help us thrive. No games. No manipulation. Do you agree?" The entity's light flickered, and for a moment, it seemed almost human. "I agree." Aaron turned to his team. "We fight." Mason cursed under his breath, but nodded, raising his rifle. Lila's face lit with a mixture of hope and fear. Kara's shoulders relaxed, as if a weight had been lifted. Ethan looked like he might faint, but readied his tools nonetheless. "Vega," Aaron barked, "coordinate targeting data on that flagship's main weapon. We're taking it down." "Understood, Captain," Vega replied. "Data incoming." The entity raised its hands, its light surging outward in a wave that rippled through the ruins and into the sky. The alien soldiers froze mid-attack, their bodies twitching as if caught in a powerful current. Above, the alien fleet wavered, their synchronized movements faltering. "What's it doing?" Mason asked, his voice tense. "Leveling the playing field," Leela said, her eyes fixed on the glowing figure. The entity turned its gaze skyward, its voice echoing through their minds. "Now we fight together." The Deathworlders unleashed a barrage of firepower, targeting the alien soldiers with brutal precision. The entity joined the fray, its energy bending reality itself. Walls of light formed barriers against incoming fire, while arcs of energy shot upward, striking the alien ships with devastating force. The flagship fired its weapon, the crimson beam tearing through the ruins. But the entity raised a hand, and the beam stopped midair, suspended in a swirling vortex of energy. With a flick of its hand, the beam reversed direction, slamming into the flagship and sending it spiraling out of control. Aaron shouted into his comm, "Concentrate fire on their engines. Bring that thing down." The combined efforts of the Deathworlders and the entity overwhelmed the alien fleet. One by one, the ships fell, their sleek forms crashing into the barren landscape. The flagship exploded in a blinding burst of light, its destruction shaking the ground beneath their feet. When the dust settled, the ruins were eerily silent once more. The entity stood at the center, its light dim but steady. It turned to Aaron, its voice softer now. "You chose well. Together, we will bring balance." Aaron lowered his weapon, exhaustion washing over him. He wasn't sure if he'd made the right choice, but for now, humanity had an ally, and perhaps a chance at something greater. As the team prepared to leave the ruins, Aaron cast one last glance at the entity. "You'd better keep your word," he muttered. The entity's glowing eyes flickered, almost like a smile. "I always do."